رحم الله من قرأ الفاتحة. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله الذي لا يبلغ مدحته القائلون ولا يحصي نعماه العادون ولا يؤدي حقه المجتهدون الذي لا يدركه بعد الحمم ولا يناله غوص الفتن الذي ليس لصفته حد محدود ولا نعت موجود ولا وقت معدود ولا عجل ممدود فترى الخلائق بقدرته ونشر الرياح برحمته ووتد بالصخور ميدان عرضه والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين خاتم النبيين محمد صلى الله عليه وآله وسلم والصلاة والسلام على أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين المظلومين واللعن الله على أعدائهم أجمعين. قال الله سبحانه وتعالى في كتابه المجيد وفرقان الحميد. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. ذلك الذي يبشر الله عباده الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات قل لا أسألكم عليه أجرا إلا المودة في القربى ومن يقترف حسنة نزد له فيها حسنا إن الله غفور شكور. آمنا بالله وصدق الله العلي العظيم. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in Surah Ash-Shura, ayat number 23 tells us, that is of which Allah gives the good news to His servants, to those who believe and do good deeds. Say, I do not ask of you any reward for it, but love for my near relatives. And whoever earns good, we give him more of good therein. Surely Allah is forgiving, grateful. Most of us know at least one part of this ayah of the Quran by heart, that Allah has asked Rasulullah to seek the love of the Ahlul-bayt alayhimus salam in compensation for what he has sacrificed. Alhamdulillah, we have been given this opportunity once again to gather here and do the zikr of Ahlul-bayt in love of Ahlul-bayt. And on this very important occasion, which is the Shahadat night of our seventh Imam, Imam Musa Kazim salawatullahi wa salamu alayhi, who is also known as Bab al-Hawaj, the door to the acceptance of one's needs. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala by the wasila of Bab al-Hawaj, Ya Allah, grant maghfirah to all those departed souls who have preceded us. Ya Allah, grant shifa to all those who are sick amongst us. Ya Allah, grant the wishes of all those who are needy amongst us. Ya Allah, grant the wishes and desires of all those who have any needs and desires from you. It is only you who accept our du'as, and we ask you by the wasila of your most chosen servants tonight, Ya Allah, grant us all that we have in our du'as to you. Ameen, Ya Rabbal Alameen. Wa sallallahu ala Muhammadin wa alihi at-tahirin. Tonight, we want to speak and discuss a few things about this Imam of ours. His name was Musa, as we know, the son of our sixth Imam, Imam Jafar as-Sadiq salawatullahi wa salamu alayhi. And his mother was Hamida Khatun, whom Imam Baqir al-Islam had freed from slavery and had trained her for this particular purpose. Imam Musa al-Kazim alayhi salam was born on the 7th of Safar in the year 128 Hijrah. But we do not celebrate his birthday on the 7th of Safar because Muharram and Safar are those two mourning months in which we remember and all the time mourn for the Ahlul-bayt and the atrocities and oppression that was meted upon them. And therefore, the ulamas have designated the 7th day of Rajab as his birthday, and we call it Imam Musa al-Kazim alayhi salam day. Imam was born in Abwa, which is a place between Makkah and Medina, also a place where the mother of Rasulullah was buried. Amongst his kunniya, the names that he has been given is Abu Hassan, Abu Ibrahim, and one of the most famous ones is Al-Qadim. Al-Qadim means one who restrains his anger because of his patience, gentleness, and he repels all evil with kindness and goodness. This is Al-Qadim. And Imam, though all our Aimma alayhimus salam were having this quality, but Imam was designated to show this quality extensively. He is also a sabir, patient. He is a zahir, which is the brilliant one, and he is Babil Hawaij also. The most popular riwayat we have is that he was martyred on the 25th of Rajab in the year 183 Hijrah in Baghdad, when he is buried in Qadimiyah, where his haram stands tall even today. And he was martyred at the age of 55 years. Out of 55, 20 years he was under the imamat of his father, and 35 years he had his own imamat, from which 13 years he was in prison. Sometimes some Zakirin tell us that he was in prison for 30 years. No, the actual period of imprisonment of the Imam is 13 years. He was killed by Harun al-Rashid, the fifth of the Banu Abbas Khalifa. Now, amongst the teachings of the Imam, his emphasis, because immediately after the Banu Abbas took over, Banu Abbas had come with a political slogan to take over from the Banu Umayyah, and there was a bitter war that happened in the Muslim world, a civil war. And the slogan of the Banu Abbas is to avenge the blood of Imam Hussein alayhi salam in Karbala and restore the Khilafah back to the children of Rasulullah. This was their slogan. However, the moment they got this power and they got the Khilafah, they became as bad or as good as the kings and the Khalifas of the Banu Umayyah. In fact, they were so tyrannical that the Banu Abbas, who although claimed to be from the lineage of the uncle of Rasulullah, they have shed more blood of the Sadat than the Banu Umayyah ever did. Now, Imam's teachings was, and when they took over, the first thing that Mansur did is to close down the Medina Academy, which had been begun by Imam Baqir and was continued by Imam Sadiq alayhi salam. And at that time, Mansur closed down the Medina Academy. So Imam, in his own capacity, was teaching the sciences in his own capacity, though there was a lot of pressure from the political corners for him to restrain. Yet Imam's main focus was to teach mantiq, logic and rationale on how to think, how to deduce things in life, how to understand things, and at the same time Imam emphasized that we have to be part and parcel of the verdict of La ilaha illallah. And he taught, and there was a big movement, and today we can see the same movement again and again. It raises its head every few centuries. There was, at that time, the head of atheism had raised its head. And there were lots of arguments that were taking away the Muslims from the very base principles of La ilaha illallah. And Imam was answering all those queries in a very logical and rational manner, proving through scientific methods and explaining to the people why the atheists are wrong. And as the adage goes, it is more difficult to prove the non-existence of God than to prove the existence of God. It is very, very difficult to, walaikum salam, to prove non-existence of the Creator. There are many debates in this level, very extensive debates and very detailed debates of the Imam with the atheists of the time. Whilst on the other hand, the Banu Abbas kings, who had turned the Khilafah into Mulukiyat, into a kingdom, and the Banu Umayyah and the Khalifas of the Banu Umayyah and the Banu Abbas had expanded the Muslim empire vast and had become vast and wide, such that Harun used to address the cloud. Whenever he saw a cloud, he would address it and say, "Go wherever you want to go, and let the rain come wherever it will come. The kharaj, which is the taxes that will come out of this rain, will come to me." That is how vast the Muslim empire had become. Baghdad was the capital, and Harun was very fond of beautiful architecture. He created lots of architectural monuments in his time from east to west. And he was very lavish in its decoration, but at the same time, the walls of Baghdad and the palaces of Baghdad were built by the blood of Sadat. They were slaughtered, their blood drained and mixed with the cement of the walls of Baghdad. Some of the Sadat were even buried alive in the walls of Baghdad. This is how he has built that empire. And he had many palaces that he had made, and he named these palaces after the names of Jannah that have been mentioned in the Quran. Like for example, he says one of them is, he named it as Kasr Khuld, which is the palace of immortality. Another one he named Kasr Salam, the palace of peace. And he was such wretched as a person that he married even his father's wife. And when he wanted to do that, the lady said, "You cannot marry me because I was married to your father, and there is no way you can marry me." It is at this time that there is a Qadi by the name of Abu Yusuf who was brought in public and asked this question. And the answer that this Abu Yusuf gives is, "Are we going to accept everything that a slave girl says? You do what you like." These are the Qazis that we call the Darbari ulama. These were bought out by the Darbar, the palaces of the kings, who gave fatwas the way the kings wanted them to give. Irrespective of what the Quran says, irrespective of what the Sunnah of Rasulullah said. Although they wanted to rule the people under the banner of La ilaha illallah Muhammadun Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. In such circumstances, the Imam could not have allowed the mu'mineen, for example, to be part and parcel of such governments. And therefore, Imam vehemently opposed such a government, and he opposed Harun's government in particular, such that he did not allow even the mu'mineen to participate or take any position that was offered to them by the government. There were only specific people like Ali ibn Yaqtin and the like who were asked by the Imam to undertake certain positions so that they may help the mu'mineen and the Shias and the believers of the time. For example, Safwan ibn Jamal was one whose business was renting out camels for journeys. Like we have these car hire companies in those times, camels were the mode of transportation, and he used to hire camels. And one fine day he had hired some camels to Harun and his entourage, and Imam called Safwan, because Safwan was one of the Muhib and the lovers and the Shia of the Ahlul-bayt. So Imam called him and said, "Oh Safwan, everything about you is good except this." So Safwan, in justifying it, said, "But O Mawla, I have not given my camels for Harun to commit oppression or tyranny on people, or for his luxuries and whatever extravagance that he wants. It is only because I gave it to him only because he wanted to go for Hajj." So Imam says, "Are you expecting a wage out of it?" And Safwan says, "Yes, that's my business, of course." So Imam recited the ayah of Quran of Surah Al-Hud when he says, "Wala tarkanu ilal ladhina dhalamu fatamassakumun nar." And do not incline towards those who are unjust, lest the fire touch you also. These are lessons of the lives of the Imam that we must take and apply wherever it is applicable to us. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ala. Harun's entire ruling was based on two major principles that we also see in today's life: fear and favor. He instilled fear into people who did not accept to be corrupted. He would finish their households, he would finish their businesses, he would kill their people and their families, and he would finish the entire family of that person who did not agree to being corrupted by him. On the other hand, he would corrupt to such an extent that even one of the nephews of Imam Musa Kazim alayhi salam was corrupted by Harun by the name of Ali bin Ismail bin Ja'far. Ali bin Ismail was the nephew of Imam Kazim alayhi salam, son of Ismail, the son of Imam Sadiq alayhi salam. And Ismail was a very pious son of Imam Sadiq alayhi salam, who passed away or who died in the life of Imam Sadiq, whilst this Ali had become wretched and was corrupted by Harun to such a level that one day Imam called Ali and said, "Oh Ali, do not go to Baghdad." And he said, "But I have lots of needs. I am full in debts to my neck. I need to pay my debts." And Imam says, "I will pay all your debts. Do not go to Baghdad." And he says, "No, but I will go." So Imam, when he could not convince him, finally said to him, "Oh Ali, do not put your hands in making my children orphans." He did not listen. At the time of leaving the Imam gave him a purse which was more than what he required to pay for his debts. Yet he went to Baghdad. But when he went to Baghdad, and he went straight to Harun, and he told Harun exactly all the movements of the Imam that would have harmed the Imam in terms of Harun. Not that Imam was doing anything wrong, but in Harun's way of looking at it, it would have harmed the Imam. However, before Harun promised to give him 250,000 dirhams of that time. We are talking of 14 centuries back. However, before he was even paid this, when he had to go to the washroom, to the bathroom, he went there and the toilet collapsed and he went inside the toilet and he was never to be seen and he was destroyed for good. He neither saw his dunya nor did he, and he missed his akhirah as well. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. Now we, the Shias of the Ahlul-bayt, we have a principle in our usul which is imamat. And one of those very important aspects of an imam of the time is that he is aware of the people, the condition of the people, and what people have in their own hearts also. If we are going to look at the imam as only, one who is going to go to a battlefield. No, Imam is one who is concerned with his followers and the conditions of his followers. And Imam Kazim alayhi salam, in an event that we will narrate, will say he was so much aware of the people and how they thought also. It is said one day, Imam used to go for Hajj many times. He used to take his families as well. One particular journey was when Shaqiq al-Balkhi narrates that I was the one who was in charge of the kafilah. I was the leader of the caravan. And we were moving when I saw a young, thin, brown man who used to keep aloof from the people, not get involved with the people. He would stay far away, he would do whatever his business is, and then he would join the caravan. At that time, I saw him as a Sufi because he had no provision for himself as well, and therefore decided that I want to go and scold him that you are not righteous. You come back to the right path and leave this Sufism from yourself and be part and parcel of the people. He says it was a stop at Qadisiyah when I saw this particular young man staying aloof altogether. So I decided to go. But before I reached him, this young man addressed me by saying, "Oh, Shaqiq al-Balkhi." And then the man said, "Ijtanibu kathiran min adh-dhanni inna ba'da adh-dhanni ithm." This is the ayah of Quran of Surah Hujurat, in which Allah says, avoid most of suspicion, for surely suspicion in some cases is a sin. So Shaqiq says that I stopped. I did not even reach the person, the young man. And that is the Imam that he is talking about. But he is addressing it as a young man. He says, I did not even go to him, but I was perplexed that this man I have never met or seen before today. And I don't think he has ever seen me or known me also. How did he address me with my full name? And not only that, the most important part is he even knew why I was approaching him, and he knew my intentions and thoughts as well. This put me into something that is very much, I started thinking about this, and that was giving me sleeplessness. And he says, the man said nothing more than this, but I did not go near him. Then I did not see this man again till at another stop. Now there is a Quranic principle that we want to discuss that Imam practically showed us, and that is the principle that it is the will of Allah that we obey Rasulullah and those of his successors after him, and it is them when a sinner approaches them, they intercede for us and seek forgiveness for us. Allah in Surah An-Nisa says, وَمَا أَرْسَلْنَا مِن رَسُولٍ إِلَّا لِيُطَاعَ بِإِذْنِ اللَّهِ وَلَوْ أَنَّهُمْ إِذْ ظَلَمُوا أَنفُسَهُمْ جَاءُوكَ فَاسْتَغْفَرُوا اللَّهَ وَاسْتَغْفَرَ لَهُمُ الرَّسُولُ لَوَجَدُوا اللَّهَ تَوَّابًا رَحِيمًا. This ayat we also recite in the ziyarat of Rasulullah Muhammad Mustafa sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, where Allah says, we did not send any messenger, but that he should be obeyed by Allah's permission. And had they, when they were unjust to themselves, come to you, O Rasulullah, and asked forgiveness of Allah, and the messenger had also asked forgiveness for them, they would have found Allah oft returning to mercy, merciful. An example of this we also see in Karbala on the day of Ashura. That when the events had come to its highest peak on the morning of Ashura, when Hur ibn Yazid al-Rihai realized his mistake, and he found himself, as he himself says, that I found myself between Jahannam and Jannah, and decided that I want to travel towards Jannah, he goes towards Abu Abdullah and seeks forgiveness from Abu Abdullah, who was the Imam of the time. Let us look at the statement of Aba Abdullah when he is giving it to Hur. Imam says, "O Hur, I have forgiven you and my Allah has forgiven you." Imam is giving us the good news of forgiveness from Allah as well. So is Imam Musa al-Kazim salawatullahi wa salamu alayk. So being in that thoughts of who this young man is, Shaqiq says, I was trying to look and meet him again, so that I may seek forgiveness from him. He says, I could not see him until we came to another stop. When we came to another stop, I saw the young man and I wanted to approach him. But before again I approached him, this young man was silent, he was praying. And then he says that after that he found him to be praying. After he finished his prayers, his tears were still flowing such that his entire beard was wet. And in that, before I could approach him, the man called out to me again by my full name and recited, وَإِنِّي لَغَفَّارٌ لِمَنْ تَابَ وَآمَنَا وَعَمِلَ صَالِحًا ثُمَّ اهْتَدَى. And most surely Allah says, I am most forgiving to him who repents and believes and does good, then continues to follow the right path, the right direction. Once again, I had no words or nothing to say to the young man. So I did not go near him. And thereafter I was trying to be near him, but I could not see him again till we reached another stop, which was at Abwa. He says, when we were at Abwa, I was wandering in the night in the desert, and I saw this young man by the well. He had a small coffee pot in his hand and was trying to draw water from the well when the coffee pot fell from his hand inside the well. So I waited at a distance where I could see the entire thing. And I wanted to see what this young man is doing. And I saw that he raised his hands in humility to Allah and began speaking to Allah by saying, Ya Allah, you are my drink of water when I become thirsty, and you are my food when I desire food. My Lord, my Master, I have none except you. Therefore, do not deprive me of it. He says, Shaqiq says that he had just finished his prayer like this, and I saw that the water level of the well had reached right at the top of the level of the well, and the pot was floating on water, where the young man stretched his hand and picked that coffee pot. He filled the coffee pot. He did wudu with it, Shaqiq says. After which he prayed 4 rakat salat, and I was watching him, he says. I wanted to approach him and have some conversation, but I wanted to watch him first. And he says, after the 4 rakat salat, I saw him take the coffee pot that had some water in it, go near a sand hill, pick some sand from the ground, and put in this coffee pot. At that time, I saw him drink from that kettle. So Shaqiq now moved a little forward and said, please, O young man, give me from something that Allah has provided you with. And the man responded, Shaqiq, Allah bestows upon me not only outwardly but inwardly as well. Therefore, you must have a good opinion of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And at that time, he offered the pot to me, and I drank from it. And Shaqiq says that it had some fine flour and sugar that I have never tasted before ever in my life. Not only that, after partaking from that pot, I did not feel hungry or thirsty for the rest of my journey for so many days. When I saw this of the Imam, I knew now for a fact that this is a righteous servant of Allah. But how do I begin to converse with a man like this? I was perplexed. So I was just watching him, but I did not see him again till one day in Masjidul Haram, in the middle of the night, in absolute darkness, I spotted the young man in Masjidul Haram. And in that time, when I got a glimpse of him. Shaqiq says, I saw the Imam engrossed in his prayers such a way that tears were flowing. He was doing munajat with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala with total humility, weeping and trembling in fear of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I did not want to disturb him. So I waited for him till he finishes so that I can speak to him. At that time, he says, it was until the dawn prayer, before Fajr, when I saw him get up from that place, go to another place in Masjidul Haram, recite his nafilah of Fajr, and then when the Jama'at was raised for the Fajr Salat, he joined the ranks of Jama'at and recited Fajr. I said, I must watch this man further. He said, after the Salat of Fajr, this young man was praying and supplicating to Allah till sunrise. The moment it was sunrise, he got up from his place, went towards the Kaaba, did his tawaf of Kaaba and left Masjidul Haram. He says, I decided to follow him of seeing where he is going. And he says, I saw him go into a very crowded area. And as soon as he entered that area, I saw so many people going towards him, embracing him, honoring him, kissing him, and giving him so much honor that I have never seen anybody being honored like that. And there was so much of a crowd that I was now very far from him. So I asked one of the people, who is this young man? And it is at that time that the man said, do you not know him? He is Musa, son of Jafar. He is Kazim, son of As-Sadiq. Salawatullahi wa salamu alayhi wa. He is the successor of Rasulullah of this time. At this time, he says, at this very moment, I knew what I had seen, that he knew my thoughts, he knew my name, he knew exactly what I was going to approach him for in all those previous stations that we were. The miracle I saw and all that humility I saw, I knew for a fact that this is the Imam of the time. When Imam used to recite the Quran, his companions used to say that he used to recite Quran in such a way that all those who would listen to him reciting would begin to weep. That was how he recited the Quran. He recited the Quran. His companion, who was a very close companion by the name of Hafs, says that when he recited the Quran, he would recite it slowly, reflecting upon the ayah of the Quran, and then explaining the commands of Allah and the prohibitions of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And then he would weep as if the Quran is addressing him. Imam's generosity was like his forefathers, the A'immah. He would go in the middle of the night in the streets of Medina to the less fortunate, covering his face so that people would not know him, people would not recognize him, and people would be asleep so they would not even know who came and gave them food. The way Amir al-Mu'mineen was doing, it is the same manner Imam Kazim and all the other A'immah were doing. His purse, the gifts that Imam used to send to people were such that it was a famous proverb in Medina, that it is very surprising to see. We wonder at the one who gets a purse from Musa al-Kazim and yet he is complaining of being poor. How can that happen? It was a proverb in Medina. This was his generosity. Imam's guidance was such that when he would guide one and all in a congregation at the same time, he would put specific efforts on individuals as well. One day he passes by a place and he hears the sound of music. And when a slave girl comes out to throw the trash, he asks the slave girl, is your owner a free man or a slave? And the slave girl says, of course he is a free man. And Imam says, indeed he is free of Allah. And there, when she goes back and reports to her master, that was Bishr, and Bishr comes running to the Imam, repenting and asking for forgiveness of the Imam. Such did he repent, and such did Imam make Bishr, that Bishr was known in the public as the most intelligent, the most wise, and the representative of Imam. That is how was the turning point and how Imam guided people. But the kings and the rulers cannot accept such, because kings and rulers want to rule by force and oppression, because kings and rulers rule upon the physical bodies of people. The Aimma rule the hearts of people. That is the difference. And we can see this when Harun al-Rashid goes to Medina and he addresses Rasulullah and says, Assalamu alayka ya ibn Am. Peace be upon you, O my uncle's son. Referring to Rasulullah as the son of Janabi Abdullah and him being a descendant of Hazrat Abbas ibn Abdul Muttalib. At that point, Imam Kazim was also there by the graveside of Rasulullah, and Imam Kazim says, Assalamu alayka ya Jadda, or peace be upon you, O my grandfather. It is at this time, and this was one of the main preliminary reasons of Harun arresting the Imam in Medina. Harun openly in public did not oppose Imam. In fact, he was even praising the Imam. And in one such gatherings, his own very son Ma'mun al-Rashid Mal'un also asked Harun, why are you praising this man when he is so much opposing to your rule? And Harun says, listen, my little son, remember this. This is the Imam of the people. He is the proof of Allah's mercy to His creation, and he is the Khalifa upon His creation. I am outwardly an Imam. Whether I call myself Khadim al-Haramain or I call myself an Imam, it does not matter. Harun has put this in his speech and says, I am the Imam of the masses by the strength of force and through oppression, whilst Musa is the Imam in truth. And surely he is more worthy of being the Khalifa over the Muslims and the believers than I am or anyone else. But listen, my little son, Harun tells Ma'mun, that power is such that by Allah, even if you, my son, attempt to take this Khilafat from me, I shall take it away back from you, even if it means I have to gorge out your eyes myself, O my son. That is the value of power. And we can see that every time when any ruler wanted to mock the Imam of the time, he was humiliated. When Harun addressed Rasulullah by Ibn Am, Imam addressed him as Assalamu alayka ya Jadda. And there is that debate that we discussed earlier, we need not go back into it. However, this brought in rage into Harun. When he did that, Harun ordered the arrest of the Imam. But before he arrested the Imam, this is what Harun is, the reality of Harun al-Rashid. He goes to the graveside of Rasulullah and says, O Ibn Am, I have come to inform you that I have no choice but to arrest your grandson Musa and imprison him. This is what Harun is. This is how mockery they were doing of Rasulullah and the tenets of Rasulullah, and how they were oppressive against the Ahlul-bayt alayhimus salam, salawatullahi wa salamu alayhim. Thereafter, he orders his people to arrest Imam Musa alayhi salam. When they come to arrest Imam, Imam was in the middle of prayers by the head side of the grave of Rasulullah, by the graveside of Rasulullah, and he was in prayers. But this Mal'oon did not even allow him to finish his prayers, and they dragged him out from prayers. It was such a tense moment that the people of Medina began to weep openly. That their benefactor, the one who looked after the yatim, the orphans and the widows of Medina, is now being taken. Allah knows best what will happen. But because Harun saw this, what he did is he brought two awnings. One he said was going towards Kufa and one towards Basra. This was a plot that he had created to confuse the Muslims of Medina. He made Imam sit in one of the awnings, but as soon as they were outside the walls of Medina, Imam was chained. Imam was dragged from Medina right up to Basra. In the harshest conditions, Imam reached Basra in the year 169 Hijrah on the day of Taraweeh. The 8th of Zil-Hajj is when Imam reached Basra. He was imprisoned by Harun and his people. And the first prison that he was in was of Fadl ibn Rabi. Imam was sent into prison. And when Imam was in the prison, he used to thank Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and say, Ya Allah, I have been supplicating to you to give me time to do ibadat of yours. Allah, alhamdulillah, thank you for giving me this time in prison so I can worship you more. And Ibn Rabi says that Imam, one day Harun came to see how I was treating Imam Kazim alayhi salam, and he says that when he came, he saw that there was a garment in the middle of the courtyard, and Harun asked Ibn Rabi, says, Oh Fadl, what is this garment that I see in the middle of your courtyard all the time? And Ibn Rabi says, this is no garment, this is Musa al-Qadim in sajda. And this is his state every day. After sunrise, he goes to sajda and does not get up until zawal is there. This is the ibadah of Musa al-Qadim. And when he started praising him, and the family of Ibn Rabi became followers of the Ahlul-bayt at that time because of the adab and the akhlaq of the Imam, Harun punished even Ibn Rabi, his own minister. And Imam was transferred from prison to prison. After Basra, he was taken to Baghdad. And in Baghdad, from one prison to the other, whoever imprisoned him was changed by his attitudes. Whoever saw the Imam, whoever saw his ibadah, whoever saw his piety, was going towards the Imam, was learning from the Imam, and was becoming a follower of the Imam to such an extent that Harun one day even sent a slave prostitute to the Imam. And when they went to see that lady, she was in sajda behind the Imam. And when Harun heard this, he was enraged and says, Oh little slave, why did you do what you did and what happened? He says, when I went into the prison where the Imam was, he made an ishara to a corner of the room. And when I saw into that corner, I saw a garden where there were flowers and there were seating places. And when I saw that, I knew that I could do nothing to such a person. The only thing I could do was become his follower. And that is why I became a follower of this man. Harun, at this time, could not bear it anymore. The last of the prisons that Imam was sent was of Sindhi. And this Sindhi was the most notorious, and this was the condition of this prison was the worst of all of those that were sent. Harun brought some fresh dates. and gave it to Sindhi. These dates were injected with poison, and Harun told the Sindhi that he must kill Imam Musa alayhi salam, even if it means he needs to use force. So Sindhi comes with the dates to Imam and offers them to Imam. Imam resists, but then he forces the Imam. Imam ate 9 of those dates, and Sindhi says, no, you have to take more. When the Imam says, oh Sindhi, your job is done, whatever you were intended with Harun has been done, but the poison took its effect and it was burning, and everything inside the Imam's body was in excruciating pain at that time. Sindhi says that the Imam was not dying and I was getting frustrated. So he says, I wrapped him in a mat and I kicked the Imam, I hurt the Imam, I tortured the Imam so that he may die faster. And it is at this time some Shias came to visit the Imam, and Imam gave his own evidence saying that it is Harun and this Sindhi who have killed me through poison. It is at this time when Imam's companion Musayyab came to the Imam, and Imam asked for a glass of water. Musayyab goes to fetch some water for the Imam. When he comes back, he sees a young man who is Imam Ali ibn Musa Rida, who is sitting by the headside of the Imam. And when he brought water, he gave water to the Imam. Imam drank from the water and was doing wasiyah to the Imam that was to follow. And thereafter the Imam proceeded to the Jannah. Ya Allah, Imam was killed by this Harun. However, when he was killed, Harun ordered that the body of Imam Musa be placed on the bridge of Baghdad. And then he made an announcement, look at this Rafidis Imam, that they say their Imams do not die. Look at this Imam who is killed and who is died. And he said, when he said this, the people were frightened of Harun's plots because he wanted to see who is going near the body of Imam so they can be identified. The Shias can be identified. He wanted to slander the faith of the Shias. At the same time, he wanted to seek nearness to Harun and get his gifts. This is Sindhi now. When he was there, when the body was there for 3 days on the bridge of Baghdad, the uncle of Harun, Sulaiman ibn Abi Jafar, stood up and brought his own sons and said, this is Musa ibn Jafar ibn Rasulillah, pick his body. He took the body of Imam, he gave it ghusl, he brought the most expensive kafan for the Imam and gave kafan to the Imam. When the uncle of Harun did that, the Shias found strength and flocks of people came, so much so that even Harun felt the threat that he and his ministers wore black clothes and came to the funeral of Imam. Yes, yeah, Imam, you are Garib. You had so many children and family who were in Medina, but you died alone. Oh Imam, you were Garib, far away. You were tortured for so many years. Yes, we'd say you are Mazloom, oh Imam. But your grandfather, Ya Hussein, there was no Musayyab to give him the last drop of water. There was none that was giving any mercy to Imam. You were given the best kafan by Sulaiman. There was no Sulaiman in Karbala to give kafan and dafan to Hussein. Oh Imam, you did not have Zainab on Tille Zainabiyah watching the Imam, her brother being slaughtered. Oh Imam, you had not lost your Ali Akbar and brother like Abbas on the same day. Oh Imam, you had not picked the body of Aliun al-Asghar which was ala la'natullahi al-qawmi al-zalimin wa sayalamu alladhina zalamu ayya min kalbin yankalibun inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un. Matam Hussein.